we talking about food waste today, and how does it relate to the resiliency of circular cities? Just so everybody's clear, when we're talking about organics recycling, that includes yard waste, wood waste, biosolids, fats, oils, greases, sludges, and food waste. So food waste is really just a small part of a larger category. And today we're going to be focusing on food waste and specifically the restaurant industry. But it's important to know that many of the processors that are managing that food waste on the back end, like Atlas Organics, are also dealing with those other materials. That organics stream can be turned into many, many valuable resources. If it's dealt with in a circular fashion, it can create sustainable local jobs. It can lead to healthy soils, which leads to healthy plants and animals, which leads to healthy people. It can also help combat the negative effects of climate change. If food is dealt with in the linear make-take waste model, not only are all of those beneficial uses of that material squandered, it can also contribute to climate change. So a lot of people have heard that, if food waste was a country, it would be the #3 global greenhouse gas emitter after the US and China. So really big impact. So my name is Ryan Cooper. I am the Director of Circular Economy Solutions at Rubicon. And Rubicon is a technology company in the waste and recycling space. So we help companies manage their waste and recycling. And then we also have a smart cities practice that helps dozens of cities implement technology that saves taxpayer dollars. We are a certified B Corporation, which means that we have a responsibility to not only make a profit, but also help people and the planet. And our mission is to end waste. So we deal with folks all across the food supply chain, whether that's manufacturers or distributors, cold storage facilities, grocers, restaurants, all the way to the folks that are collecting that material and processing that material. And contamination is a big issue, which we'll be talking about here in a little bit. But one of the cooler stories is that we teamed up to do a pilot with the city of San Antonio, Texas, and we piloted what we call Rubicon Vision, which is a contamination detection tool. It turns out that Atlas Organics actually manages the facility where all that material is going on that organics route. So you can check out our YouTube video about that. Very, very cool story. So with that, let's jump into this. Cece, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Cecelia Mercer. I am a recent addition to the Chipotle sustainability team. I joined Chipotle last August 2020, mid-pandemic. My background is in food sustainability, food business sustainability. I've worked on farms, having composted food waste on smaller scale farms, and also had a little bit of vermiculture in my apartment, so have a personal consumer level intersection with composting. Prior to Chipotle, I was working with Costco and their sustainability department, where they're looking at regenerative agriculture, which intersects also with, again, that food composting. I worked with the World Resources Institute on the food team, and also Saputo Dairy Foods, which is a dairy supplier, again, on their sustainability team. I'm really delighted to be here with everyone today and tell you a little bit about Chipotle. If you haven't heard of Chipotle, Chipotle is a fast casual restaurant. There's over 2,700 restaurants in the US alone. This past year, giving you a little glimpse of the sustainability report that's due to be launched in April, we composted 60,000 cubic yards of waste in 2020. That's approximately 29% of our stores in our composting program, creating the 60,000 cubic yards of waste that's not going to landfill. It's going to vendors such as Atlas Organics. We have over 800 restaurants in our composting program, which is really exciting. We added over 100 of those last year in 2020, which is a huge addition to this growing movement. And as you can see on the screen, only approximately like 9% of our waste actually can be composted, and that's due to cool practices like mindful prep, making sure that our avocados for the guacamole that we're so well known for are being fully utilized, so that it's really only the pits and the skins that are going towards that composting waste stream. I'll talk a little bit more later on in the conversation about some of the other cool pilots that we're running with our avocado pits, but want to hand it over to Ryan to introduce Leslie.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cece. Leslie, it's your turn.
Thank you. So hello, everyone. I'm Leslie Rogers, Director of Business Development for Atlas Organics. I've been with Atlas since 2016. I started in the education sector, and part of that was launching our residential service. So very on the ground, very connected with the actual person who is filling our containers and our carts. With Atlas, I've grown. I now manage all of our business development, which includes hauling units as well as the finished product sales from our facilities. We have 5 facilities across the Southeast. And so I am most known for my efforts with the U.S. Composting Council Young Professional Group, Kiss the Ground as a soil advocate, and most recently I joined the board of directors for BPI, leading the Composters and Municipalities Committee. So Atlas Organics is a developer and operator of compost facilities. We have a consulting and development team as well as operate our own facilities. We partner to create sustainable solutions. So we do handle all of those organic streams that Ryan mentioned in the beginning. And at our 5 facilities and 2 hauling units, we have 450,000 tons per year of material under development currently. Thanks, Ryan.
Awesome. Thank you, Leslie. And really excited to dive into this conversation. Before we do, did just want to mention that more than 103 million tons of food food waste were generated in 2018, which is the latest year that we have data from the EPA. That's including the industrial sector. And food continues to be the largest percentage of landfilled materials by weight, and also materials going to waste to energy. So, I did want to mention just a little bit about nomenclature. The EPA uses wasted food, and in some cases, perfectly good food does go to waste. And we'll use that term, interchangeably with food waste because, there are materials that, are not fit for human consumption. So, there's a little bit different, a little bit of difference between surplus food and food waste. But, it's very important subject because one of the first things that we should do when we're looking at food waste is try not to create it in the first place. So can there be smarter ordering practices, or can a bruised apple be used in another product, or can there be, an app that helps consumers find food that's on its way towards being expired? So there are methods to try to reduce the amount of food waste in the first place. If it is healthy food products, then by all means it should definitely go to people in need. And after that, in permaculture we call it stacking function. So if somebody takes a crust off of their peanut butter and jelly, can that material go to animal feed and keep it higher in the food chain? If not, can it go to anaerobic digestion or ethanol production or biodiesel? But no matter what, all of those residuals should be composted and returned to the soil, because because soil is just one of the most important resources that we have on the planet, and obviously has a huge impact on the food system. So today we're going to be talking about some of the unique challenges related to the food system and cities. Cities play a huge role because they're the population centers, and many times, food is coming from rural areas into the cities, and then that food waste is often, going back out. And so how can we tighten those loops, bring food production and organics recycling to the cities? And do want to give a shout out to the U.S. Composting Council's Target Organics Committee, which is developing guidelines for cities that would like to recycle their food scraps and may not know the next steps. So definitely keep an eye out for that. And in a lot of cases, the private sector is leading this charge. So for instance, Chipotle is composting their food scraps. Atlas Organics is running their own facilities or doing public-private partnerships and creating the infrastructure necessary for companies to do that. So let's do this. Cece, first question goes to you. What role does Chipotle play in the food system?
So when I first think of the food system, I think of the intersection between agriculture, economic development, community nutrition, food access, and Chipotle is right in the middle of all those things. So we pride ourselves in having really great ingredients. We actually pay a premium on some of our ingredients to ensure that we have the highest quality ingredients. And I like to think you can taste it in all of our delicious burritos and bowls. We focus on how the food's raised, and part of that is the inputs going in. So whether that's organic materials from our composting that's going towards the farmers and the way the food is being raised or grown, that's part of it. And then also the food that's accessible to a lot of people who are in urban areas or cities is offered at an accessible price point for the quality of meal they're getting. We've got cilantro rice, and everything is prepared in the restaurant with knife skills of chopping the cilantro that before it goes into the rice. So it's really exciting that we play into this intersection. We also talk about economic development as part of that food systems intersection, and we've got I think it's 15,000 jobs that we're hiring for this year, additional people. So that's adding to local communities, economic development. We also are huge supporters of local farms. And again, that's that local economic development piece. So Chipotle has a cool role to play in between these intersections, getting to be part of the food system. So that's how I see Chipotle there.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for that. So Leslie, how does Atlas Organics interact with food systems and cities?
Yes, so with Atlas and our hauling services as well as our compost facilities, we have everything from small scale collection. So that's that residential program that starts with a 5-gallon bucket. Restaurants like Chipotle use, our traditional 64-gallon roll carts. And then we also work with the food producers and manufacturers that were getting semi-trucks of organic material at the same time. So, the thing with commercial composting and what Atlas is trying to do is provide the infrastructure for every single organic stream that's coming out of a community and having it make it to a facility, to our facility, to a compost facility, so that it can be turned into something that our soil and our farmers actually need.
Awesome. And can you just kind of paint a picture of the facilities for the layperson?
Sure.
How do your facilities compare to backyard composting? How long does stuff take to break down? Those kinds of things.
Great question. So composting is all about the right environment, right? It's about having the right amount of oxygen, the right feedstock, so the amount of nitrogen and the amount of carbon. And so it can happen it is a natural decomposition process. The difference of, say a vermicompost bin that Cece mentioned, it's a small scale controlled environment to where, we're operating facilities on 16 acres. So the difference is, the more The more commercial side of composting, we're able to take in a massive amount of organic material in a short period of time and compost it in a very quick turnaround. We give nature everything it needs to have it be happening as efficiently and effectively as possible. So, a home composter can expect, their food waste that they put in to finish soil compost amendment in, at home it's 6 months to a year maybe you're going to get the finished compost. At our facility, it's normally a 45 to a 60-day turnaround from a Chipotle burrito remnants to finished soil that is ready for a farm. So it really is, when we talk about composting infrastructure and we talk about commercial composting, not only is it the scale in which we can address material, but it's also in which the efficiency and the quick turnaround that we can create what our farmers need, what our soil needs.
Amazing. Thank you for all the work that you do on that. Can you talk about some of the challenges and solutions that you guys have developed around these particular practices that you're talking about?
So in terms of, so I think that being flexible and being able to adapt with our customer needs, being able to adapt with, limited space. Can you fit 1 cart? Can you fit 10 carts? How quickly is that material coming in? And, you mentioned the EPA hierarchy. Is there a way that we can donate material before it comes to composting? These are all different ways that we can increase efficiency and accuracy in putting material where it actually needs to go and to where it's, it's benefiting and supporting an active kitchen. So you think about a very busy restaurant. Composting needs to fit in and be easy with what's already happening. You go to a restaurant to enjoy its food, to enjoy its environment, not, being sustainable is definitely something that you invest in, but composting needs to fit into the existing environment.
Agreed. How about you, Cece? How do you see those challenges and solutions?
So when you're thinking about the challenges between cities and regions, as I mentioned earlier, we have 2,700 plus restaurants. So we have a pretty good glimpse of what the different infrastructure is across the United States. And it's not consistent, to Leslie's point. And you also referenced, Ryan, that there's guidelines being produced right now so that there is that consistency. So a real challenge is understanding in what markets are acceptable for composting and also recycling if we broaden it out to diversion just in general beyond food organics. One of the ways that we're working to address the challenge of contamination because of the multiple different acceptable materials that different haulers accept is having front of house education for our customers. We have over 20 different signs with visuals on our waste stations so that customers can see, as Leslie pointed out, like, oh, chips, they go here. There's a little icon of a chip. Oh, our cups go in this location. So we have it customized to each market on what haulers are accepting or whether it's municipalities, they might not accept it if it's a municipality-run compost section. The other thing that varies across the country is cost and accessibility with infrastructure. Cost and infrastructure are closely tied, or lack of infrastructure. There might not be composting in less you see composting offered more in dense areas, and that might be, Leslie can talk to this more, efficiency of picking up. While we at Chipotle don't have 16 acres behind every single one of our restaurants to be turning our food scraps into organics, when you have closely located restaurants in a New York City-esque environment, compost haulers can go boom, 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 right next to all the different restaurants that are located near each other to take those organics to the facilities that can turn them into this wonderful amendment to soil. And that's not always seen in areas where space is a little bit more spread out, so the infrastructure might not be there. So that's what we see as far as challenges.
Thank you. So Leslie, can you talk about kind of, infrastructure in general, but, what some of those regional differences might be and how you approach that?
Yes. So, I've mentioned Atlas Organics is here to build composting infrastructure. It is what we need for organic streams. Across the country in different regions, there are different limitations. You talk about the cities, but you also talk very rural areas where you're a state away from the closest landfill or recycling center. Each area needs the same capacity to recycle their organic material. So we're doing our best, partnering with municipalities, partnering with, cities and counties that identify a very large organic stream and know that they want to be a part of the solution. Sometimes the cost of different transportation or even landfill costs depends on how much land is available. So each area does require a very specific, very time-intensive process to see, what are the regulations? What do we have to do for permitting? What is the municipal law or regulations, and what is the state requiring us to do? And it is different right now. Different states, different places, all these different things have to be addressed individually. Like Cece mentioned, just having this conversation today and Atlas working on this as much as we can to get to a place where we're seeing a more consistent opportunity across the board and get everyone closer to being on the same page so we can be more effective. I think that's something that both Atlas and Chipotle, really kind of struggle with, being the most effective we can with all the different variables.
Yeah, I agree. So have you seen an increased demand from your customers for these types of circular economy strategies?
Absolutely. It is fabulous, actually. The amount of times I hear, circular economy, close the loop, regenerative agriculture. I mean, the fact that Chipotle is buying from as many local farms as they can, that is what we need. We need companies, we need individuals to speak up and define this as a value, to close the loop. I would say in the past 6 months in particular, I've had conversations with corporations addressing their streams with specific goals, zero waste by 2030 or 2050. There's definitely an evolution happening. There's definitely innovation happening. I think one of the reasons why Cece and I are here is to support the efforts and bring everyone on the same page so we can be the most effective to close the loop across the board.
I agree. Cece, so how do you see whose responsibility this is? Is it local municipalities? Is it federal government? Is it business?
So as someone who's worked for the government, nonprofits, and private sector businesses, I don't think it falls on one entity. It's not one group's responsibility. It's got to be a joint effort. So governments and businesses aren't experts in everything. So specialized nonprofits need to educate these different sectors, and then governments can spur action by providing funding to support composting infrastructure or have mandatory composting. The private sector and companies have this, as Leslie alluded, they can set these goals that will ultimately spur on the rest of the sector with ambitious targets. So I think it's a give and take of all the different groups working together to make sure we're on the right path forward toward this more circular economy.
Agreed, for sure.
Ryan, if I could just add to that, something that we forget about with composting is that it not only are we diverting waste away from the landfill, so we're reducing the negative impact of our organic stream, but we're also channeling it into a compost facility that is processing and making a finished product that can build up our soil and build up our land. So with organics diversion, you're in a sense doubling your impact.
Yep, completely agree with that. Cece, back to you. So food waste is a part of a restaurant's environmental footprint. Are there other circular economy solutions that you want to talk about?
Yeah, so on the slides that I had earlier, I kind of had some pictures of different things, and you can check them out on Chipotle's YouTube. But two of the really exciting pilots that Chipotle is focused to minimize the waste going to landfill, one of them includes avocado dye. So we're taking used pits of avocados and turning those into a dye for part of our Chipotle goods line. Chipotle has dabbled into the clothing apparel sector as well. You can find them on chipotlegoods.com, I believe is the website. But we have about 300 million avocado pits at our restaurants every year because of the love of guacamole. And so each item of clothing and good, there's sweatshirts, t-shirts, and I think a bag. They use 5 avocado pits, which is roughly the equivalent of 5 orders of guacamole. So we're taking those pits and they're not going to landfill. They're being turned into this dye bath. And so that's one of the really cool things that launched this past year, where we partnered with a local dye house. Another thing, when you look at the waste stream of what's coming out of Chipotle, about 9% of our waste stream is film plastic and plastic gloves. So we're piloting a really nifty project. There also is definitely a YouTube video on that one because I watched it probably 10 times, where the gloves that we use to prepare our food are being collected by our restaurants and crew members. They're being sent to a cleaning facility in Salinas. Again, it's ingrained in because I've watched the video so many times. And the gloves are turned into our garbage bag liners. So we're giving another life to the gloves, which is a really nifty way to address parts of our waste stream that are unique to Chipotle.
Thank you for that. Leslie, back to you. What about other technologies that you've seen that you think are important to incorporate into these types of programs?
Yeah, so I think Cece mentioned, how they address their prep, the way that you cut, the way that you manage. There's so many different things that you can do to optimize what's in front of you. There are different waste minimization softwares, like LeanPath and Winnow. I've seen those be very, very popular in certain areas. I think it's again, we keep saying this. Each situation does need its own look in how you approach and make the best decisions. What is great about, Chipotle and having a kitchen that has all the same ingredients across the board is you can make those choices and replicate. And I think just also incorporating education with the people that are actually engaging with the compost collection. Why are we doing this? How does this affect you? What does this do for your local community? All these things are ways to heighten. If we're going to invest, let's invest our absolute energy.
Awesome. And then, people being disconnected from their food is not only an urban phenomenon. How does Atlas participate in closed loop programs? Like, where does that material wind up going?
Yeah. So, when we talk about being for mass streams of organic waste, there's a lot of compost. Agricultural markets, landscaping markets, very dedicated home gardeners, master gardeners, nonprofits that we work with several nonprofits that are providing opportunity for challenged members of our communities to interact with the soil. There is something really, really natural about interacting with the soil and connecting with the fact that you can grow something that you can then eat. So, we're really lucky with our compost house, our residential program. Compost back. So the soil amendment back is a part of the subscription. So, every month we have hundreds of members benefiting from the fact that they're using our program and composting with us. And they're using it in their flower beds. They're using it on their grass, their their sod, growing their own vegetables. It also, since they're used to using the compost themselves, not only do they talk about it, but they share and teach others. So, if we have 10 compost houses in a neighborhood, it's just a matter of time before more and more people in that neighborhood dial into the fact that composting can be a solution for something in your own garbage can. The other really nice thing about having this residential base, we also do it with our commercial customers. So corporations in particular have very large employee communities. And so, we have a corporate customer that gets compost for their employees every year. Everyone just brings a 5-gallon bucket to work. They scoop up some compost and they head home. So it's this engagement with the finished product. And then we also get to refer them to local farms where they're using our compost to grow the food that they're selling at the farmer's market, or even just the different mobile markets that take organic produce around certain areas, including some of our corporate customers. One really cool story. I still get chills when I think about it. But we had a really, really bad storm in the upstate of South Carolina, near where I am, and a farmer who has gotten compost from us year after year, just his whole entire field was flooded. This is a small scale farmer, 3 young children. Like, this was their life. This is what they were choosing to do to support their family. And they lost it all. It just kind of sat in water and anything else just washed away. We reached out to our compost house members and said, hey, have you heard of this farm? We would like to donate compost credits to this farm so they can rebuild. If you have credits you're not going to use, can we donate them for you? And we were able to get a good amount of compost to him so he could start rebuilding his fields. So again, it's just those connections. It's just, that is the circular economy that you want. That is closing the loop to where you're benefiting not only in your own waste stream, but in your food source, higher nutrients, it's just that true circle.
Awesome. I love that, Leslie. I can go on and on with more stories. When you're talking about that education, it automatically makes me think of how we've been rolling out composting with that education piece forefront to our Chipotles. So with the 100+ restaurants that have rolled out composting in the last year, making sure that we call all of our field leaders, and we do it regionally, these rollouts, so that there's normalization. Sometimes people have never heard of composting before, and there's a lot of I'm going to say myths around it of it's going to attract pests and rodents and other things of that nature. And when you have these conversations with people of normalizing, nope, composting is just another bucket. You already have these food scraps that are going to your garbage. They're just now going not to landfill, is really important piece. And you talk about how neighbors can educate one another about the benefits of composting. Same thing happens, as you mentioned, in the private sector, where our restaurants can talk to each other and say hey, we're doing this here. Field leader, if you have questions, making sure we have that education piece, because we talked a little bit about contamination being a huge issue for the organics recycling industry just in general. But for our back of house, it fits in right with our food prep. We can manage our controllables in the back of house a lot more easily than our customers, even though we have this good education at the weigh stations, so that when we're making our prepping our ingredients, it's a no-brainer of, okay, this is how we're going to put our pepper seeds and stems into this bucket with that education piece. So I just love how you're talking about, it's really this almost communal effort, not only within the communities and your neighbors, but also within the communities of different businesses.
For sure. That knowledge sharing and making sure that the communication flows up and down throughout an organization, and that you have champions that can, reinforce and educate internally, is a huge part of that education effort. And seeing a lot of, questions in the chat about packaging and, greenwashing around certified compostable packaging. And, it's another area where I think that there's a lot of consumer confusion. Leslie, can you just talk a little bit about certified compostable food serviceware? Do you guys accept it? And
Yes.
How do you guys see it when you're collecting material?
So we do accept certified compostable products, BPI certified compostable products. It is something that is a topic of discussion among composters right now, because of the contamination issue, among a few other things. So we do accept them, we do process them, and we also feel that it's a valuable tool to help our society evolve and innovate. One of the best ways to teach something is to imitate a behavior that the person is used to. Certified compostable products allow us to do that. It allows, the people that we're working with and really encouraging to do as much as they can to just learn in stages, right? You can grow in stages. In terms of contamination, the thing about contamination is it slows us down, and we lose opportunity. We lose material opportunity in the process, because we're trying to make sure that our finished product is super clean for the farmers and homeowners and the landscapers that are going to put it on the soil. When you want to go, take care of your flower beds or your vegetable garden, you do not want a whole bunch of plastic or glass or Ziploc bags. Like, that is not what you want to grow your food in. So being mindful as a composter that we really have two customers. We have the hauling customer who is collecting and really sharing responsibility in this feedstock of material coming into our facilities. And then we have our end users, our customers on the other side that would like a quality product, in terms of what they want to work with. So I think, Ryan, you mentioned greenwashing as well. You wanted me to touch on greenwashing?
Yep.
Yeah, it is a struggle. It is definitely a struggle. And this is where, regulations and, specific, large, big picture efforts really matter. I think because of COVID and because a lot of food service environments have had to go to a more disposable, protected, experience, we're seeing so much more just even to suppliers, supply chains have been definitely disrupted by COVID and just through the whole everything that we're trying to do to live in the state of the pandemic. I have customers that have had their items be changed without their knowledge, and they just thought they were putting something compostable in our carts, and it was changed, 3 people back in the supply chain without them even realizing. So it is a huge issue that, again, consistent communication, dedication, and partnership is really going to address.
Yeah, and I think successful case studies is another way that, like you and Cece both mentioned, showing people that it does work or doesn't work, and I think, kind of seeing is believing when people want to, know how to do it, whether it's a consumer or a generator, going to those composting facilities, seeing how the process works, I think really opens up a lot of people's eyes. So Leslie, can you just describe a little bit more? I'm seeing some questions about, I mentioned the U.S. Composting Council's Target Organics Committee, but you're actually working with cities to make this all work. Can you just describe a little bit more of that process of how, it's sort of a similar process, whether it's like I said, a business or a consumer or a municipality, on how to even start approaching this,
right.
What
right.
advice do you give them?
Yeah. So, what Atlas tries to do is, we have experience with every organic waste stream. We have experience at every scale, super small satellite site to extremely massive, and even operating hauling units, as well as just being a compost facility for our partner. So again, just having those varied and diverse skills, a municipality is the same. Is the same. You are a customer, just at a different scale. So we bring all of the experience and different, facility options to the table, and then we just kind of work as it is a partnership. We work as a team in cooperation, saying, okay, this is top priority, this is priority number 2, this is priority number 3. This is how we can address this stream, this is how we can address this stream, this is how we can handle this within your budget. So it really is a partnership between our innovators and thinkers that have worked with every single type of site or setup of a site to fit, how big is the space? Is it a rectangle? Is it a square? Is it a triangle? All of these things matter when you're citing, where's the pad going to go? Where the active composting, cells going to go? It all can change. The nice thing about composting, and I make it sound complicated just because there's so many different variables, but the thing about composting is once you identify what your target is and what your need is, the process and the infrastructure can be very simple, and it can be built in a short period of time, from anywhere from 3 months to a year and a half. So it's really about identifying what's most important to you, what is possible to address, and then your budget, and then partner with Atlas or someone like Atlas to really kind of go through that process of what it would look like. I hope that helps.
It does. Yeah. I think that there's probably a lot of municipalities and probably a lot of businesses that would really like to do this and just, don't know how. And again, I think the successful case studies, both, on the generator side and the processor side, helps build that momentum so that everybody can kind of bounce off of, again, what works and what doesn't. So, I know this isn't, what's that?
Yeah, I was going to say one more thing when you bring that up. So when so when if you are a municipality, having the different departments that you work in line to say, what the needs are and the projections of what your area or your geographical area is going to grow in, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. It is an investment, a long-term investment that actually can truly pay off.
Awesome. That's helpful. How about you, Cece? Any advice for, colleagues or just reflections on, how the program has gone for you and what could be done, the same or differently? What advice would you give to other businesses?
So being relatively new to the composting program at Chipotle, as I mentioned, joined 6 months ago. A huge thing that I found really helpful was having these conversations with haulers, with our waste management partner, Rubicon, yourself, Ryan, learning kind of the basics so that I can speak to a degree of knowledge where I'm very confident of this is how it works, and breaking it out really simply. As Leslie mentioned, restaurants are inherently very busy places in the back of house. When you're making tons of burritos and bowls every day, tacos, you want to make it so easy that it just slips right into your daily your prep. It's just part of the routine. Working to make sure the education piece highlights the benefits too, because as organizations, we're made up of individuals. You see that people are excited to make diverting the food scraps away from landfill because they've seen Greta Thunberg or whoever else in the news talking about climate change. This is a huge, important issue to many of our employees and also our customers. So having that piece and making it accessible to that point of these are the positives for why we want to do it, but here's also the breakdown of, you've got your bins, you take them out just the same as your trash, and just really answering any questions too. I try to call all of the field leaders for the restaurants that we're rolling this out so that it's not just like, hey, you're getting composting because sustainability said so. Really having that conversation, making sure there's buy-in, because if you don't have that buy-in, you're going to get the contamination, which Leslie has noted is not good for any of the parties, whether that's the folks who are giving the food scraps or the ones who are ultimately utilizing the soil amendments. But so those are the things that I've seen in the short time that I've been working on this composting program.
Yeah, one of the challenges that, we run into is kind of the yuck factor. So people say, is it going to stink? Is there going to be odor? And I like to call it the flick of the wrist. It's literally the same exact material that you're already dealing with that might go into a gray bin now, but, can it go into an organics bin instead? And actually, when it's managed separately, a lot of times you don't have that, leaky compactor, dumpster, and, the problems that come along with not managing it separately as a resource. So, I think that there's a lot of moments where we can help people along and show people that it does work and that it's actually a better system. Now, this wasn't on purpose, but it is National Women's Month. So, as two industry leaders, do you guys have, example of challenges you faced or perspectives that you've been able to bring to your organizations?
Cece, go ahead and go first.
So one of the things that I was thinking about as you're asking this question is, to be a leader, you actually have to be in the position first. And so what makes good leaders is my boss is so passionate. I would follow her anywhere. This is incredible to have passion when you're bringing it. And I think that inherently is a leadership quality when you're bringing your passion forward. But for women, one of the stats that's always a little staggering to me is that women inherently will not inherently, but are less likely to apply to jobs if they aren't qualified, if they don't meet all the on the job specification bullet points. If 10 out of 10 aren't hit, then they will not apply. And so if you're not even applying to the jobs, you're taking yourself out of the running. To be a leader, you got to actually be in the position. So one of the advice that I would encourage women who are hoping to be leaders in the industry is to apply for the jobs that you might not hit 10 out of 10, because how is a job listing maker going to know all the different things that are needed for that specific role? Your passion is going to be hugely important too, and that might not come through with all the bullet points of the job specifications. So that would be my advice to future women leaders.
Yes, and I will just agree with that. I mean, I think that one of the reasons why, some of our early adopters that I had the pleasure of working with actually started composting was because I just brought passion. There was a goal. We wanted to divert waste. I would like all of our communities to be better. I've lived in several different states across the country, and cities and rural areas. And, we all have the same desires and issues and want a better quality of life. So I think just bringing that passion, bringing determination, and knowing when to listen, knowing when to just listen to someone else and then work alongside them. I can't tell you how many dirty puddles or rainy days I've worked along my coworkers and we've just gotten the job done because it needed to be done. So having that confidence and walking in and knowing you're totally capable, your way or somebody else's way, you are able to do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing your stories and experiences. Any final thoughts in the last couple minutes that we have here? I'll throw out a couple. So, one is around kind of, community composting and that kind of small scale, connecting urban farms and community gardens. And, I will just say that I think we need, all of those different scales, because you mentioned the permitting and the regulations, Leslie. I know from my experience starting a state permitted composting facility that, as you mentioned, that can be a huge challenge. And I think that, while we need, large regional facilities that can handle, hundreds of thousands of tons, I think we also do need, just like Compost House and your residential program, we need those, small scale solutions as well, to make sure that we're covering all the bases. And I think that there's lots of room for, municipally run facilities, private run, large scale facilities, all the way down to folks that are collecting on bikes and composting at urban farms and community gardens. And so I think that while, we can zoom way out and say that we need a lot more, large scale regional infrastructure, I think we can also zoom in and say that, like, in our urban areas, we can also, solve a lot of those issues really, in the city. So some examples in New York City of small scale community composting, all volunteer run and really inspiring stories. And, there are challenges, lots of them, whether it's the large scale facilities or small ones with funding or with, neighbors that maybe don't, want facilities nearby. I think think, the answer is always education, right? Because, if folks say, oh, well, I don't want a landfill next to my, house, and that change in mindset of, hey, composting facility isn't the exact same thing as a landfill, that we need these kinds of circular and regenerative systems to manage these materials. So they've got to be put somewhere, right? So, how can we get the community more involved and more educated on, what needs to happen and how to do it? So those are just some of my, final thoughts on how cities can become more circular.
Yeah, Ryan, it's also, when you mention the different scales, it's about access, and it's about, when you ask people, restaurants, communities, corporations, when you ask someone to change their routine and their system, it takes a lot of work, it's one thing if it's one household, right? But if you look at, where, and it can keep going, it does take effort to change. And, having an easily accessible option for organic waste, like you talk about the flick of the wrist, if you have something on your countertop, you are much more likely to use it than if you have to, travel 30 minutes by car and drive it somewhere. So, understanding this idea of giving people, setting communities up for success on an individual basis and on a community basis. Ease, access, and affordability are some of the main pillars that we started Compost House with. And I go back to them all the time, because to make change and to encourage innovation in our waste streams, it needs to be simple, you need to have easy access, and it needs to be affordable and supported from, local community entities, whether that be the municipality or whether it be, a corporation like Chipotle, like really leading the way and saying, we're making these choices and we're investing in this for the betterment of you and your community.
Awesome. Well, I think that is a beautiful way to close it. Thank you guys so much for your time today. Really appreciate the conversation and excited to keep it going.
Thank you. Thank you both, Ryan and Cece. It was great.